Hello, this is Mark L. White with Health Hacks, and today we have Kashif Khan, the CEO and founder of the DNA company. How are you? How are you, Kashif?
Good, good. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to be here. You're up in Canada.
We're in Toronto, yeah, just out of the longest lockdown in the world now. Enjoying some free time outside.
Okay, you started up. You're not a doctor, correct?
Correct, yeah,
But you started up the DNA company.
right.
Now, about 10 years ago, I remember I took a test. It was like one of those box tests, 23 and something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, they gave me some information, but I don't think I've ever really looked at that test. Why do you like, what was your purpose for creating the DNA company, and how does it differentiate between these over-the-counter tests that we see popping up at Walmart and Target?
So that's exactly why we did this, is that everyone knew since DNA was discovered that there was a jewel inside of us. It's literally our human instruction manual. So if there's a code that's telling every single cell what to do at any given time, shouldn't us decoding it be more informative than what you experience? Like, you're 10% this or you're 80% likelihood of getting Alzheimer's, but that doesn't really tell me anything other than I should have anxiety because I might have Alzheimer's, right? So those types of things. And that's where I jumped in. I was actually personally in my mid 30s going through a health crisis because as an entrepreneur, I ignored, I did everything except help myself,
Mhm.
ignored myself like so many entrepreneurs do,
Yep, know it well.
and work, burn yourself out. And I literally was sick, migraines. I was at the point where I just couldn't go to work anymore. And that set me on a discovery mission that eventually a year into it led to DNA, where to truly personalize what I need to do, I needed to understand my genetics, which then, long story short, led me to the world's top functional genomicist who I sat down with and said, what's in your head everybody needs. This is the thing that everybody's been waiting for. It's not about I got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, but the 20% of people that have the same genetics as the people that were told 80% chance, why didn't they get it?
Mhm.
Why didn't they get sick? What were they doing? And that's what we then set out to study for the last 3 years. And the last thing I'll say about it is we conducted the largest study of its kind in the world, where we met 6,000 patients, one by one by one by one, to see with the same suboptimal genetics, 80% chance of cardiovascular disease, why did 80% get it and 20% didn't? So it took DNA from insight to more instruction. It's now actionable.
So like with the test I took, I learned I was 3.4% Swedish. Not much I could do other than go to IKEA a little bit more. You take your test and somebody learns that they are predisposed towards heart disease.
Right.
They take action, but shouldn't everybody just take action? Like, what is it? Like, what makes it so unique? These percentages, and how do they act upon that?
So that's been the big gap in why genetics has not been applied to chronic disease. If you look at genetic testing companies, they're trying to solve genetic problems, meaning something like sickle cell syndrome. You're born with it. It's a genetic condition. There's a gene variant that directly causes that problem. They're looking for a therapeutic to turn that switch off one day, hopefully, and then that problem goes away. You're not born with type 2 diabetes. You're not born with cholesterol problems, breast cancer. These are things that happen in your 50s plus typically, because you have to do the wrong thing for that many years to cause that much inflammation to lead to the disease to express. So our question was exactly like you just said, isn't it the same for everybody? Well, most of us are doing the same thing, but we don't all get the same diseases. So it starts with, where are we suboptimal genetically? You and me,
Mhm.
two different genetic maps, we're probably going to have different weak links, right? So the different areas where if we were to expose ourselves to the same stuff, which disease would we get? Which cellular structure is suboptimal to begin with? And for a lot of people, it may be cardiovascular. Then you look at, okay, now that you know what's suboptimal, which is the first layer of what we call functional genomics, what is the load that you would put on that that would make it worse? What is the load that you would put on it that would make it better? In environment, nutrition, lifestyle. Those are the buckets of the things that you do to yourself. What do I eat? What do I expose myself to? How do I exercise that either increases the expression of the disease or decreases, right?
So let's talk a little bit about nutrition. So I assume it's a saliva test that you
Yes.
take,
Yeah.
and then it comes back. Does it tell you like this is what you should be eating, this is what you shouldn't be eating, and this is why?
Just, yeah, so there's 6 big buckets that we get into. And this is after those 6,000 patients, what we realize most people need to be sort of the optimized version of themselves. And the big buckets are cardiovascular disease. And by the way, these are all intertwined, meaning that it's not that you just do this and do this, like the diet crosses over to cardiovascular, mood and behavior, the brain crosses over to diet. If you don't know how you perceive food, you don't know how to eat it, right? So the big buckets again are cardiovascular. Mood and behavior is probably the biggest one because everything else is dependent on that. If you don't understand the way your neurochemicals are firing in your brain, you don't even know how you think about things, right?
So moodiness is something that we inherit from our parents, our grandparents. That's something in our DNA.
Yeah, your DNA determines how you deal with the 5 major neurochemicals. Dopamine, which directs pleasure and reward. How reward seeking am I? How flaky am I? Am I, a binger? Am I an addict? Those types of things. Serotonin, your mood regulator. Am I irritable? Am I kind of more aloof? Am I highly detail oriented? Am I more macro and high level? Then you have adrenal, which determines your adrenaline response. Am I prone to PTSD? Am I a person that holds a grudge? Am I the person that filters emotionally? And then there's BDNF, which determines your mood level. How much do things mean? Now, if you understand this about yourself, I don't need to meet you to know your personality. If I have your DNA, I know exactly how you think, what career you're wired for, how you deal with the people around you.
At the same time, shouldn't somebody, like I know my wife is moody. I
Right.
don't need a DNA test to tell me she's moody because I'm around her and I'm like, you're moody.
Yeah.
What is it like? Is the test more, oh, that explains why you're moody, or like how
Well,
does
yeah, it explains, it puts more definition to moody. So moody means that people around you see you're reacting, you're expressing, right? Is that because you're prone to stimuli? Is that because you produce too much toxic estrogen? Is it because you bind onto negative stimuli and you hold on to pain? So if it's understanding your brain leads to 2 things. First of all, the awareness, and we haven't had a single person that hasn't gone through this, wow, like now I finally understand, right? So the first is the awareness, and then second, harnessing it and using it as a superpower. So the same thing that makes you irritable, and like when somebody says, oh, sorry, I'm going to be late for that meeting, and you get irritated where some people don't even care, that same thing makes you highly detail oriented and catch things that other people don't see. So it's kind of like, here's your genetic map of your brain, and now you know what to do with it. And we haven't had even the top level CEO who wasn't completely blown away with what they didn't yet know.
so when they do the test, do you have, okay, this is what the test says, and now this is what you need to do about it? Do you assign a
Yeah.
coach to them? Do you assign them a doctor? Is the test done through a doctor?
So it can be ordered directly through our website. Only recently in June. Before that, it was always through clinicians. But what we've done is we've built a fairly robust artificial intelligence platform that allows the interpretation to happen. So a consumer can now buy it and get these reports that are actionable. Beyond that, yes, we do. For the most part, people get into coaching. So we do recommend it to people, and they end up taking. So the 6 buckets I didn't finish telling you. So cardiovascular, mood and behavior, diet and nutrition, fitness and hormones, so body type, how do I put on fat, how do I put on muscle, those types of things, skin, hair, acne, inflammation and detox, so the root cause of most cellular dysfunction and disease, and then chronic sleep issues. So those are the 6 buckets. Once we get someone through the test and they've sort of figured out who they are genetically, kind of here's what's wrong, we also recommend here's how you fix it, whether it's supplements, nutrition, etc. Then we say, we're a biotech company with science. We're not necessarily the best at changing your behavior. So we actually hired Dr. BJ Fogg. He runs the Stanford University Behavioral Change Lab. And we said, here's our reports. Here's what people get. How do we get people to do this stuff so they actually get the outcomes? Because that's what they wanted in the first place. And that's built right into the reports.
Yeah, I met BJ at the Consumer Health Summit in Arizona a few years ago. Super guy.
He is awesome. Yeah, he's awesome.
Tiny habits.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah, he's brilliant. So he helps you, like, once you kind of know like how you're wired. So really what we're talking about here is I'm going to tell you how you're wired.
Yes.
Once we know how something's wired, it's much easier to fix it than to try to fix something that it's like trying to fix a house without the engineering blueprints, I would assume.
Yeah, you just keep poking and trialing and erroring until eventually you find the right thing, or you could just find the right thing, right? That's what we kind of lead people into. And also it takes you away from symptom masking. People complain about the pain point. This hurts, this bothers me, this. You're only ever going to mask that thing as a check mark of success. But why is that thing happening? There's maybe 2-3 layers prior to that, 7-10 years of the wrong decisions that led to that pain point. That's what we deal with.
So one question I hear all the time is, what kind of food should I be eating? And you hear like, eat right for your blood type.
Yep.
I've heard that. You hear people, well, if you're from the Mediterranean, you should eat a Mediterranean diet. If you're from the north, it's a keto diet because that's what they ate. They were hunter-gatherers more.
Yep.
Like, does this kind of like tell you this is the diet that you need to be on?
Yeah, it's much more personalized. So all of those things work, but you know, typically when someone goes on this wellness journey, they try 3, 4, 5 different things before they really figure out what works for them. And there's some trial and error. There's some, I feel bloated, I don't feel bloated, I slept better, I didn't sleep better, until you finally figure it out. Or if you understood your human instruction manual, it's already there. It tells you how you metabolize fats, how you metabolize carbs. It tells you if you should be a vegan or not. I can't tell you how many people we had to get off the vegan diet because it was making them sick. And they were blaming it. We had an actual doctor who was a female hormone doctor who had self-diagnosed herself with a thyroid problem, right? And was taking medication for it. And it was just getting worse. We actually reversed it by getting her off a vegan diet. And I'm not saying a vegan diet is bad. It's ideal for certain people, right? But
I think you hit the point for certain people, because we tend to say everybody needs to be on this diet, everybody needs to exercise this way, and you know, we're all completely different.
we're different. So, and I'll give you that example. So with this lady, what was going on? There's one gene that determines how well you produce the enzyme required to break down the main protein sources for a vegan: beans, legumes, lentils, right? Chickpeas. That's what vegans typically get their protein from. So now if you don't have the enzyme activity to break that stuff down, and you're eating it day after day after day after day, imagine the load on your digestive system. Why do people end up with things like Crohn's and colitis and leaky gut? You know, because you're doing what you were never meant to do. But the opposite is also true. There's some people that are optimal at that, and we tell them, focus on this stuff, you know, because it's actually better for you to eat more plant-based. It's all based on the individual, and that's where eventually you'll get there, or you could just save the pain and figure it out from day one.
So the business model, which I'm always fascinated about different companies' business models, is that the consumer purchases the test. Do they also then purchase ongoing coaching? Is there a monthly subscription fee?
It's packaged, meaning that we kind of show people an evolution they can go through. I mean, here's your test. You've learned some stuff. You can make some changes. Then there's, why don't you dive a bit deeper? We're going to give you some science behind these genes so you can start to understand how your body ticks. And that's a digital coaching program, a one-time program. Then there's, why don't we get you some actual health coaches to support you and drive the behavior change, build the infrastructure you need around you that you most likely won't do on your own. Very few people can, right? Then the third layer is, now that you've done all that, why don't we make you a genetic guru? Meaning it's not only you, it's your family and the people around you that also need the support. And if you know it so well, why don't you help them? And that's, we call it it's more of a training program. And so this evolution, you don't need to go through any or all. Getting the report gets you what you needed. I want to know about myself and I want to change things. It's a matter of how much support do you need, right? And then, and that's, it goes from, but the one other thing I should add in terms of your saying business model, where the entire genetic industry, there's this whole fear over data. Do they have my data?
Yeah,
Privacy?
I was just going to ask that, the data,
Yeah.
and how do you use that data?
Yeah, and that's what I feel was broken with the business model. And what we changed is that all these companies came out with beautiful science and these amazing reports, and then they realized that our business sucks because DNA doesn't change. So you test somebody once and you're done. Right. It's not like blood testing.
It's not blood testing at all.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So then the investors started to say, well, what's next? You're going to sell to every American, and then what? Right. So that's where they had to come up with the reoccurring business model, and they started to focus on the data. And they said, let's package the data. We can sell it to pharma companies, which makes sense. Right. But where that left things is the focus became our customers, the buyer of the data, not the buyer of the
Right.
test.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you get an experience as a front-end consumer that kind of sucks. But the data buyer, because the test has to be designed for what the data buyer needs, not what the consumer wants, because the consumer doesn't really know what to expect anyway.
Right.
Right.
If what I've always learned is if something's super cheap or something's free,
Yeah,
then you're not the consumer, you're the product.
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I think
That's
where you've turned that around is the person who actually purchases the product here is
yeah.
actually your consumer, and you're there to help his or her life.
We're there to solve their problems, and that's our goal. So our goal, so we don't sell data. We're not in that business. What we do is we build probably the most powerful AI around functional genomics on the globe. It goes through 200 trillion data points to come up with its insights. And from there, we just talked about coaching, that's sort of the support, but it's also, what do I need? I want to take supplements. I want to download apps. I want to do meditation. I want to sleep better. What do I need? So we're curating all those things in a marketplace that's genomically mapped. And that's, I feel, the most important thing we've done.
So if I take a DNA test, and I plan to take, I haven't taken your test yet, but I plan to right after this. I want to, because I want to see if I should stay on that vegan diet.
Sure.
But if I take that test, you can then tell me these are the supplements that, based on your DNA, these are the supplements that will most be beneficial for you. These are the supplements you don't need.
So in terms of genetic expression management, meaning that what we're doing is we're saying that here's where your genes are suboptimal, meaning that here's where you could potentially lead to cellular stress that will lead to inflammation and disease. So let's support that system. We're not about masking symptoms. We're about supporting systems so that you don't ever get to the symptomology. So everything we do in terms of supplementation is how do you augment genetic expression, up and down regulate genes. Simple example, if you think about, for example, the Chinese population, how many generations did they drink green tea, right? Literally thousands of years, and now they've stopped. And all of a sudden you see cancers, anxieties, all these issues coming up because this potent antioxidant, which was in their bloodstream all day long, every time they sat down, somebody was serving you green tea, EGCG, everybody knows how powerful that stuff is, right? So what we say is that it's not about everyone needs EGCG. We're saying that if your detox pathways are suboptimal, glutathionization, we're not going to give you more glutathione because you don't have the genes telling glutathione what to do. And I can't tell you how many people we've seen that have gone to their naturopaths. I had no fault of the naturopath. It's just common sense that, oh, glutathione, your heavy metals are up, toxins are up in the blood. Let's give you some glutathione. If you don't have the gene telling glutathione what to do, it's also going to bind onto the minerals. It's also going to bind onto the nutrients because it just doesn't know. So you have to give precursors and things that don't require the instruction. That's how we augment genetic expression. Or there's actual ingredients that speak to the gene and make it work harder. For example, I can't tell you how many women we have with hormone issues that they just can't get resolved, which leads to crazy fertility issues, PMS, bad menstrual cycle, hair loss, polycystic ovarian syndrome, where we can actually provide ingredients that will slow down or speed up estrogen pathways, slow down or speed up the conversion into estrogen toxicity to prevent these problems or reverse them if they already have them. So there's two layers. It's replacing what wasn't there genetically, or up or down regulating the gene that isn't at the place you want it to be. That's what we do.
So when you report the information to your client, is there an app that people are in, and is that how you engage your client?
So today it's through the reports. So it's all in the reports. September 17th, we're launching the digital version, actually at Dave Asprey's conference, the Upgrade conference.
Next week or 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah. So he's actually an investor in the company. He loves what we do. I chased him around at a conference until he would spit in a tube. And then he said, okay, this sounds good. Became an investor. But anyways, so we're launching the digital version, the interactive version on that day at his conference.
That's exciting. That's
Yeah.
exciting. And that will also allow, now with the DNA test, once you have somebody's DNA, as you build out your technology and you build out your science, will you be able to give the consumers more insight without them having to submit a new sample?
Yes, that's the intention, is we're going to continue mining. So we just spent the last 3 years completely mapping out what we feel are 80 of the most important genes, the ones that are most functional in nature. And we've got to the point where we think we've learned all we can. There'll be some incremental learning as we go along, but we now produce reports. We just added another 400 genes that we're now going to start researching. I mean, a lot of it, I would say, is fluff. You see a lot of genetic testing companies saying we test for 1,000 genes, 800 genes. Unless you can take action on it, doesn't mean anything, right? Unless you can actually affect the epigenetics and the expression, doesn't matter. So we've just now added some that are functional. So that, yes, that research will continue. The reports will keep getting better.
Are you guys involved with anything regarding COVID and genes and how it
Yeah.
relates to COVID?
So we actually launched the first report for risk of severity, meaning how sick are you going to get. So if I have your DNA, I can tell you in advance how sick you're going to get. Because we know that there's COVID the virus and then there's COVID the disease, which is really about respiratory inflammation and cardiac inflammation. It's an endothelial disease. So if we understand genetically how well you're doing there, we also understand how sick you're going to get. And that's why you see some people walking around with no symptoms, right? Well, they probably have the most robust endothelial lining that you could think of, and really strong respiratory clearance and mitochondrial strength. All that's a combination of a number of things. But yes, we've done that, and we've been doing it for some time.
How do you test the accuracy of that? Are you surveying your clients?
Yeah, well, as an example, we never stop researching ingredients. So we have an active pool of a few hundred people that are in a research project in our lab where we custom compound ingredients for them that just keep improving certain things. And in that, we surveyed, I think it was 160 people replied saying that yes, they had COVID, and not one of them had severe implications or hospitalization. So 100% of the people from our, I think it was 300 people at the time that were surveyed that were on our custom genetic expression management program, not one of them got sort of sent to the ICU.
That's really interesting. And I would assume that your tests are most powerful when people are working with an integrative physician or some sort of coach. If they don't have a coach, you'll match them up with somebody in their area, or is that all done via telemedicine?
Yeah, so there are clinicians that we supply to that we can recommend that do specific things. Some do metabolic work, some do female hormone stuff, for example, right? But we have our own internal coaches that we can recommend that they're all encompassing because they understand the genomic side also, right? So it's both ways.
Okay, and how many people, currently, where are you at with clientele? How many clients do you have?
So we finished our research project in February, which was 6,000 people, right? And we then started building the consumer platform, which launched in June. And in June, another 2,000 people were added. And then we stopped to convert the platform we built into the digital interactive, which is what I was just telling you about, which now launches September, 2 weeks from now, which is then what we're going to sort of put heavy marketing dollars to and scale. Very few people that want to know we exist yet. The functional medicine world knows very well. The biohacker sort of influencers know us well. We have not spoken to the public yet because we've been coming out of research as a biotech, but we're now ready.
And where are your goals? Like, where do you see your company in 3 years, 5 years? Like, what's your mission?
Well, in 3 years, I can be very specific to that, is that our intention is by getting out there through clinicians and direct to consumer and building this ecosystem of genetically mapped people that can all of a sudden start to get strided into various buckets, diabetics, female hormone issues, cardiovascular, etc. We can then work with the healthcare industry to help them build personalized products. So all these companies are out there saying that they want to do a better job. They're not sure where to get what will drive them. So we believe we'll be that sort of, call it Intel inside chip, that personalizes whoever's already doing a good job, from something as simple to a gym that wants to build a personalized training program that we can do for them, to as complex as a healthcare system that wants to sort of get diabetes out of their population, right? And then that's this next 2 years is to build the customer base, and the year after that, 2 to 3, is to build those partnerships, which by the way, we've already started working on right now. They're waiting for us to do that. And in 5 years, what I see is one thing that we've done uniquely that no other genetic testing company is doing is we've built a phenotypic assessment. So your genotype are your genes. I tested your genes. Here's a list of them. That's your genotype. What does that mean and what does it equal? I have anxiety. My nose is this long. I have brown hair. That's your phenotype. How does it manifest, right? So because we're the only company that meets our patients in 6,000, we've documented all the phenotypes, which allows us to reverse engineer and simply ask you questions and assume your DNA. So what I see in 5 years as we build that out is that we have a healthcare database version 2.0, where even when you go to your family primary care doctor, that they have a second set of questions they can ask you to be more precise about the protocol and to figure out really what's going on. So that's really the mission for us, is all of this leads to building a parallel healthcare system that's personalized.
No, that's really interesting. So while you learn more about the phenotypes and you learn more about somebody's DNA by matching it up with what they're actually telling the clinician, you're able to now predict, well, if this one's going this way, we know this about you. So it is about getting more data, but using it not to sell off to healthcare company, but using it to make your clients' lives better.
Exactly.
I think that's an amazing mission. And I think it's completely different than the ancestry tests and 23andMe's out there. Because I think the layer that has been missing is that personalized layer in between.
Yes. So some of them say they're doing this, but their focus is on genetic conditions, which is a very small percentage of the healthcare problem. Like literally, Center for Disease Control says that 90% of America's $4 trillion healthcare budget is chronic disease. 90%, it's all preventable, right? So that's the difference, is they're saying they're doing it, but they're doing it for not enough people.
How long does it take when I send in my test? How long does it take before results come back?
So as of today, it takes 4 to 5 weeks. As of October 5th, it's going to take 10 days. We're building a new lab. The industry standard is about 4 weeks, but we're building a new lab, which is launching October 5th, which brings it down to 10 days, 2 weeks max.
That's exciting. So if somebody wants more information, they go to the DNAcompany.com.
.com, correct, yeah.
Awesome. I really appreciate the time, Kashif. It's been fast. I've learned a lot today. So
No, it was a pleasure. It was
I'm going to
great.
get my DNA test done, and I'll probably see you up in Orlando.
For sure. And we'll check if you're still 3% Swedish. Maybe that changed. Who knows?
I'll still be 3% Swedish. I don't think that's changing. It'll be interesting. Have you compared the results that you come up with based on the results in other platforms, or like or I know that some platforms you give your DNA and then you can use an API to share that. So I don't even have to give you my DNA. I can just download. There's an API. Is that?
That's the tricky thing, and that's a big one. I would say that's one of the biggest questions we get. Can I give you my data from some other test? The trick is that, again, remember, those products were designed for the end buyer of the data. So the way they test is depersonalized, meaning that they're looking for what's called a SNP, which is like a spelling mistake in the gene. The T is a C. It was supposed to be a T, it's a C, and that means something. That's not the only kind of variation that exists in genes. You can also have what's called an insertion or deletion, meaning an entire paragraph is missing from the gene. If so, suppose you're reading a book. You could also have a copy number variation. You don't even have the gene. Forget about what version or what spelling, you didn't get it, or you have an extra copy of it. So if that's instructing something in biochemistry that's implicit in healthcare, imagine the implication. For example, we were talking about glutathionization and detox. You could be missing those genes, right? Literally don't have them. So when we get data from other companies, they don't have those data points in there. What they do is they assume what's called the CNV. They assume it by looking back again at what is the typical profile look like for somebody who's missing this, that has a CNV. 9 out of 10 times they have this, or they have this, they have this, and they assume it. But again, there's chance of error. Dale Bredesen, well-known author that's cracking Alzheimer's, said that he tried to use the conventional SIP testing, but where he was looking in the brain, there were some parts that were 65% accurate, and at the highest, it was 80% accurate. So he said, how can I use that?
Yeah, It's fascinating. It's like you guys look at everything instead of what's just commercially powerful for my business partners.
Yeah, because our business partner is a customer. We have no other partner. There's nobody buying the data.
I love your mission. I wish you the best of luck, and I think you're changing the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.